My name is Christy Busby, and you are about to listen to the next episode of my podcast called F.A.T.E, From Atheism to Enlightenment. So come on in, join me. We're going to talk about it all, from atheism to enlightenment. Alrighty, guys, here we go. Get ready, and welcome to your F.A.T.E. Welcome, everyone, to the next episode of F.A.T.E. How's everybody doing today? On today's episode, I am bringing you Melanie Weller. They call her the Body Whisperer. She is a neurotheologist. She is a author. She does speaking engagements. She has her own podcast called Fearless Presence. I'm very excited to have her on the show today. Melanie Weller, welcome to your F.A.T.E, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Christy.
Thank you for taking the time to be here with me today. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to hear your journey. And I always like to start from the very beginning. And how did you become the Body Whisperer? How did you get where you are here today? I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, I won the educational lottery in physical therapy and athletic training. And that's really was the foundation for becoming the Body Whisperer. I had amazing mentors through my undergraduate in athletic training and through my graduate school in physical therapy. And I still have yet to meet anybody that had as amazing of an education in athletic training and physical therapy that I had. Like, it was just, all these 30 some years later. And so, and very early in my physical therapy career, I ended up working in a clinic where we got a lot of patients that had been around the block a few times and had not found success. And I had an amazing, not long after I got there, they hired an amazing physical therapist that had a reputation for being the Body Whisperer in his own way, for fixing out, if nobody else got you better, you saw Rick.
Yes.
And so I had an amazing opportunity to be mentored by somebody very closely in that situation, and just always had this really unique skill set. Like, I was always taking osteopathic and visceral mobilization kind of things, as well as doing more conventional physical therapy. And very early, like in that same time frame, I read Carolyn Mace's Anatomy of the Spirit for the first time. So my chronic pain patients all started to make sense to me. And I would sneak in little things like if they had a knee problem, for example, like she says, your lower body is your first chakra, and it's about your relationship with your tribe. So I would just ask people about their social support systems, or like, hey, what do you do for fun? Do you hang out, and just very casually trying to put this together to see like if where they had pain and matched the information in Anatomy of the Spirit. And it worked pretty well. And
probably scary well.
Kind of scary well. Well, and especially, and this was like 1990, like say I was doing this in like 1998. Like, we were not where we are right now in the spiritual, like the collective spiritual journey.
Yep.
And and so I was always kind of bridging the esoteric and science pieces. And then in like maybe 10 or 15 years ago, my life was upside down. I had a health crisis, a marriage crisis, and a lawsuit crisis, all in very short, very close proximity. And my life was not making sense to me. All of my logic skills were not helping explain the situation.
I so feel you. Yep.
And I turned to astrology to see what it had to say. I was like, and I had a dean at one of the local universities here referred me to a good friend of hers who is an astrologer. So I got this incredibly grounded referral, which she still says is the best introduction she's ever made between two people. And and I had kind of stepped back to do some reading, and I read about how for example, the Egyptian myth of Isis and Osiris was the story of the Earth's precessional cycle. It was just the way they wrote science back then. And that there were numbers in the myth that were associated with the Earth's precessional cycle. And when I looked at the numbers, I was like, oh, I know these numbers in the body.
Wow.
And then when I, in astrology, every sign goes with a body part, or at least one body part. So like Aries rules the head, Taurus rules the throat, Leo rules the heart, Libra rules the kidneys. And I have this favorite image. It's a compilation of MRI images from an anatomy book that I've had forever that shows you it's a 3D representation of what the ventricles of the brain look like. And the ventricles make cerebral spinal fluid. And it's my favorite picture of anything, and it has been for decades. And I've showed it to people all the time. And when I came back to that picture after studying astrology, I was like, oh, this looks just like the ram's horns that represent Aries. And I was like, oh, where's the rest of it? And I just spent the whole, it's all there hidden in plain sight. It's like our fundamental science. I call it our fundamental science hidden in plain sight. When I think about being made in the image of God, we are made in the image of the zodiac. And we have too much light pollution that most of us miss. Like, we can't see it.
We certainly have too much noise or light pollution out there. I mean, I was just out in the Joshua Tree Park. I live in LA, and I was in a space where I could see the stars, and it struck me how little we get to see the magic of what's out there. It really does strike you in a way that makes you feel so much more a part of something way bigger, and we don't have access to that. At least I don't in LA. It's really it's a tragedy. Really
yeah,
is.
no,
But
I
anyway,
live in New Orleans, and we've got, it's like I have to travel a long ways to get to real dark sky areas. And, we know the sun is information, but we don't really consider, collectively, like we don't have that relationship with the night sky. And so what I started doing with that information, when I realized it was basically creating a form of energy medicine out of it. Like I would feel for those ram's horns in people's heads. And when they were wonky, or like asymmetrical, if they felt like there was tension between them, for example, I would do what I do to take the tension out of them. And they would get more neck range of motion. Their headaches would go away. They would get, it was like this. I mean, I have some pretty wild, like really amazing osteopathic skills because I had amazing mentors in that arena. And this was getting me better, faster results.
that is fascinating. I have to tell you, I have interviewed quite a few astrologers, and I've been swimming in this spiritual community now for a little bit. But I have never heard anyone make the connections between the body and the stars and the zodiac before this conversation. This is
well, you're not. That's what everybody tells me. Like, this is not out there on any kind of scale. And even like my medium tells me, she's like, well, Melanie, you're here to finish Franz Mesmer's work. And Franz Mesmer was a physician in 1766. His dissertation was the effect of the planets on the human body. And so like I have like, and really, and I've really been like treating the vagus nerve as a pinched nerve has been my more conventional branding, approach to it all. But your vagus nerve gets pinched between your signs, like where your Aries and your Taurus intersect, like the base of your skull, and when your Taurus and your Gemini intersect at your collarbones. And
this is blowing my mind.
If you and like we all have our planets and our, all of our, it takes 26,000 years to have the same birth chart that you would have. Like, so everybody's got these, you're like, there's not another birth chart that's like, that's going to be exactly like yours. And but we all have these, what I would call a zodiacal skeleton. And when if your zodiacal skeleton is right, then you can hang your personal planets on it with more stability. And, and so I also live in the world of neuroscience and conventional nervous system regulation and evidence-based things. And so like, I really understand so like, I don't want to minimize the science that's out there around all of this, because the hardcore science about just how you rehabilitate things is pretty amazing. But I am all about making it better, faster. And how do you, one of the things that I really notice in, I get that, like, sometimes, like, there's a lot of talk about training your nervous system and that you have to, and I get that part of it. Like, I came out of sports medicine. I understand exercise science inside and out. Like, I get it. But I find a lot of people, when they use that evidence or when they've had complex trauma and when they have a lot of stuff going on and they're using that conventional approach to rehabilitation, they're often really beholden to their exercises just to keep baseline function. And that if they don't do their exercises, it
Falls apart.
things go sideways for them.
Yeah.
And what I find is that people, or for me, like, approaching it through the lens of aligning your nervous system to the solar system, and I'll talk about some of the evidence around that too. But you can do your exercises, but like, nervous system regulation becomes more automatically a way of being and not something you have to do. And you don't have to become trapped by your exercises or dependent on your exercises. And they're great when you're in, I have my own routine before I go out on a stage in front of people. And I get it. There's things that make me feel grounded and, but I think that but I think that we can make it easier. We can make it better. And that's really the thing that, through the course of my career, that I didn't realize I was just doing it because it was fun, sort of, for me in the moment. Yeah. But when somebody would come, because my patients always had 100 things wrong with them, or I could write a dissertation on every single body about the positive tests and all the range of motion limitations and biomechanical issues and whatnot. But the game I played with myself was, what 1, 2, or 3 things can I do to make 10, 20, or 30 things better for this person?
Oh, wow.
And I didn't realize over the years how valuable that game really was, because I learned then what what was just kind of noise in the system, and, oh, this is the problem when you see that, and this is the pattern. And that really allowed me, so in the throes of my own midlife crisis.
Would you say, I have a lot of people on the show that have trauma, and that leads them to their spiritual awakening. Is this a situation where you weren't very spiritual when you were younger, and then you had all of this immense amount of trauma, and it kind of forced you into seeking something more, seeking something different, and it launched you into your spiritual awakening? Is that another tale?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah. I think our trauma are our guardrails. My trauma is very much around lost voice and not being allowed to sing or being forced to be in choir, forced to mouth the words while I was there. And so then I ended up specializing in the vagus nerve, which innervates the vocal cords. And then I found out through astrology that that lost voice is my karmic backstory. And I was like, oh, I made all this happen so I could be right here, right now. And that's a lot of power.
Yeah. For my audience, let's talk a little bit about what the vagus nerve is, what it does, and how it affects the body, just so everybody knows when we're speaking of that, what that is. Yeah.
So your vagus nerve does lots and lots and lots and lots of things, but it goes all the way from your brainstem down into the pelvis. In people with a cervix, it innervates the cervix. It's a lot of your feel-good things. It innervates your voice, your heart, and your digestive system. When you feel relaxed and happy and calm and confident, it's your grace under pressure nerve. You know when it's not working, especially when you have kind of a stage fright reaction, and then you get that lump in your throat and your palms sweat and your heart's racing and your stomach is churning. And that's all because your vagus nerve got dialed down and your fight and flight responses got dialed up.
Interesting.
And there's so much more. I've been doing vagus nerve decompression as a core part of my practice for 20, 25 years. So way before the vagus nerve was as cool as it is in social media right now. And really treating it as a pinched nerve in the body, that it gets mechanically compressed at where we have horizontal structures like our diaphragm, vocal cords, base of the skull, collarbones, pelvic floor are all horizontal thresholds in the body. And those horizontal thresholds can add mechanical compression to the vagus nerve. And really the geometry of the body is a huge missing piece in the nervous system regulation community, because you can teach somebody that doesn't have a hands-on practice, like that doesn't touch people or really have that understanding of bodies, all the nervous system exercises in the world. But you can't understand geometry of the body until you've really had a lot of bodies under your hands, I think. And even our immune systems, like part of it is run neurophysiologically and part of it is geometry. It's plug and play, like shapes, receptors. And so you have to have this, it's both. And I even talk about it being this, the neuro part of it, the geometry. So this neuro, geo, mytho, there's this mythological part of it too. And the way that these stories that exist in, not just in astrology, but in the Bible and in the Vedas and in all of our spiritual texts really tells a lot about what's happening inside of us. And those stories really hook into our bodies in particular ways. And I can go into a few examples of that if you're interested, but I'll pause there because I know I'm spewing a lot of information.
No, I mean, this is really the first time that I've had somebody on, because I've had lots of conversations about science and spirituality and how they don't align a lot for medicine. And as far as like healing, for me, I had my own spiritual awakening. Everybody, I've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. And Western medicine wasn't helping me. And the only thing that did help me was alternative ways of healing, energy healing, plant medicine journeys, things of that nature. And I love that you really feel, or from what I'm understanding, you really have, between mapping the body and what it is and aligning that with the zodiac and what is in the sky and how they overlay, sounds pretty magical and spot on. This is the first time I've seen science and spirituality align like this. I haven't seen it in other areas of medicine yet.
You will see more and more of it because that research is really coming to the forefront right now. And spirituality is something like 28 or 29% genetic.
Oh, wow.
And if your mother was spiritual, they've been able to separate out spirituality and religion. If your mother was spiritual, with or without being religious, you are massively protected against mental health issues, especially depression.
That's so interesting.
And so you will see more and more and more of this, but there are not, our research, the research in general rewards, focus, like going smaller and smaller and smaller and not necessarily zooming out and seeing how all the dots connect. And I'm definitely the person, I'm a dot connector. Like that's my superpower, is to go, to read the interdisciplinary stuff and go, oh, look at how these things intersect. Look at the similarities between, in the brain, between dissociation, epilepsy, spiritual experiences, and the brains that they've studied of psychic mediums is extraordinary.
I mean, I will say this, it feels like everything from our health to what happens into our reality on this plane, so much of it goes back to spirituality. And I feel like we're in the midst of the great awakening on this planet. I think more and more people are starting to awaken to who and what we are and how we work and all of this. And, it's just remarkable to me how you could solve the majority of what happens in our lives by looking to spirituality. What are your religious beliefs now? How are you into organized religion at all, or where
I'm definitely not into organized religion, but I recognize that organized religion creates a lot of nervous system regulation for people. That they're, that prayer and singing and being, part of a herd. Like we'll do anything to stay part of the herd.
Yes, we do, don't we?
And looking near and far, like, reading the hymnal, and you like look at the words, and you look at the altar, and you look at the words, and you look at the altar, like that looking near far is an amazing nervous system exercise. And as church attendance has plummeted over the last 10 years or so, nervous system regulation as an industry has come up, and we are not inventing anything new. We are just solving the same problem. We used to go, people went to confession, and now they confess to their counselor. Like, they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Just, it's just repackaged and in a different way that maybe feels a little safer. Certainly organized religion is very skilled at weaponizing love.
Yep.
And I still think that when people pray, when you talk about, when people credit God for doing things in their lives, to me, that is 100% the astrology, always. It never comes without that explanation also.
Yep. Now, in your practice, do you have intuitive gifts? Are you an intuitive? How, let's get into a little bit of that. Like, how did you come to find that you had these gifts, and how did they reveal themselves, and how do you use them in your practice?
Oh, it's like, well, it's been like it. So often the story I often tell about this. So in the, because I collected, I have all this experience that gifted me this reputation as a body whisperer, and I collected credentials and certification like some people collect fine wines, and I've got lots of letters after my name. And in the midst of my life being upside down, a patient walked into my office that had his suicide planned for that evening. And I knew I had to bring more than just my clinical skills to the table. And I unleashed my intuition on him, which I don't I have some pretty good mediumship skills, and I have, and I've been to England to study at some places that, to do some deep dives into that. And I gave him a mediumship reading that was very spot on. He knew exactly who I was talking about. I picked up how they died and what they used to do together, and all. It was a very accurate thing. And and I did all of my clinical stuff with him too. But 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better. Do I think that my clinical expertise alone undid his suicide ideation, or took made him completely change his mind? No, because he had such an emotional reaction to the mediumship reading that, that was a huge somatic release for him too. And I know that the way that I perceive the zodiac in the body, my ability to go, oh, your ram's horns are wonky, or your Taurus isn't sitting right, or, to perceive all of that in the body, is the same mediumship muscle. Because when I haven't done it in a while, but I used to drop in now and then on some platform mediumship groups just to practice. And I would, even though I had not done mediumship in ages, and especially not in that way, like if I do it, I'm touching somebody, I particularly have my hands on somebody's body, and it's a very intimate experience in that way. But I could always rock the platform mediumship reading, because it's the same. I know it's the same muscle, and I don't really, I still only really pull it out when it needs to be pulled out.
Break in case of emergency.
Yeah, it's kind of a break. Yeah, all right, this is not what this isn't going to fix the normal way. But it also is kind of one of those, it's how I'm able to perceive that, oh, this isn't really your fear. This is an ancestral thing. Because we are, and we know now, we have all the science to say that our DNA gets tagged with that, the fears and, the traumas of our ancestors, or that this is, or that maybe you have a ghost in your neck, and this ghost is, what's really
energy,
causing, this energy of this, because you're not getting this message, it is sticking to you, and my patients will all tell you, especially my in-person ones here, that what they like about, like, they like it, they come to me like they love the soft skills, like they really like the, that piece of it. But they also know that if something is really serious going on with them medically, that I'm going to tell them not to mess around and go to their doctor, because I have picked up tumors and cysts and things like that really actually need surgical
Attention.
intervention. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to pretend that I can heal that. And I don't know, maybe I can, but you don't need to wait around. Like, you need that evaluated by your doctor. Like,
Yes. Well, it's good. I'm glad at least you know your limits, Now, when did you start to learn that you had gifts? How did that come about in your life? Like,
I would say it was probably always there at some level, but really in the throes of that midlife crisis, when I started, or like, I made a commitment to myself to really fully show up with my patients, that I was not going to dance around this, because I can spin all the woo, or things that might be woo, in very, like, legitimately, I can talk about, like, oh, well, you're, like, you have these shears going on at these segments in your spine, or I can, tell you that you're Leo, you're not lined up with Leo constellation or something, like, I mean, I could spin it, like, I could say it from a lot of different ways, but
right.
I just made a commitment to myself to show up more fully and to be more fully expressed. And the first person I saw after that, she had neck pain, and I very painfully told her, like, it was painful to me, not to her, that I thought she had a ghost in her neck. And she had a whole story to go with it, and was so relieved that I had said that.
Oh, wow.
Because there was this whole background story. And the next person I saw, I said, there's a book that you need to get rid of. She had a bunch of tightness around her liver, diaphragm area that was really fussy. And she knew exactly which book I was talking about and had a whole story to go with this book. And so I learned, just like, little by little, and just making that commitment to myself, because it's so easy. I mean, even now, when one of my favorite things to do is to do a healing demonstration. And I've started doing these for my Substack, my paid Substack members, twice a month. But to do, like, run the group through a process, but then to pick people and, like, okay, I'm going to, like, to sort of give them a love seat. And and I've done this live too. And every time, like, not as much online anymore, but, like, it's not in front of a new audience, and especially in a, in person, a part of my brain is always like, oh my God, like, is this even going to work? Like, what is, like,
Right.
because I know I'm channeling, or, like, this isn't really, like, it's got this, like, its own most thing that's happening. And in my head, like, I have no idea if this is going to work, and it's because it comes, like, because I end up riffing off of ways that I've done, like, sometimes things come out in new ways, and it always works. But in the back of my mind, I'm still like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work. But
I hear a lot of mediums kind of say that they still, especially in the beginning, they second guess themselves, and when they get such accurate readings and such confirmations, it really does build up your confidence that you are getting the correct information you're getting the correct downloads.
Oh, for sure.
It's real,
Yeah. Well, and I think that little voice, like, I don't really think that it is competing with my confidence so much anymore, but I consider it an indication that I'm not in my ego.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That, like, that I'm not trying to make what I want to happen, that I'm actually, like, what wants to happen is coming through me.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about time. How
Yes.
important time is. I mean, it really can affect us in our current life, what has happened in our prior lives. Can you talk a little bit about what
Sure.
time and how it can affect our health?
Yeah. So time is really to me, is like, I'm finishing up my book right now, and the time is really the the topic and like the thing that brings all of this science and esoteric wisdom together. Because whether or not you believe in astrology, the zodiac is a clock.
I never heard it referenced like that, but
You
that's
know,
that's
like,
interesting.
and like, I mean, there's like, it was a clock to ancient people, what constellations are on the horizon at the spring equinox and all the, like it's a clock.
Yep.
And the sun moves through the constellations, and it really does it in circles, like it's a circle like around the earth. There's,
Right.
the zodiac. And our bodies we are made in the image of the great clock. And the research now shows that the common thread between basically every mental health diagnosis that is out in the mainstream, that would be very familiar to you, a lot of neurological disorders, things like Parkinson's disease and dystonia and even autism and orthopedic injuries, I will say too, is time perception and processing. It's all like timing. And a lot of the same parts of the brain you would rehabilitate for trauma, you would rehabilitate for time also. Just viewing it through the lens of time, I think is a, like, for example, like I always start with the cerebellum because it regulates sub 1 second units of time. And you can't be organized in seconds and minutes if you're not organized in milliseconds. Right. And so it just gives you like a little bit of a different approach for like maybe how to structure a session or how to work with a patient. But time is the root of all of it. And I think that, and I know that, there is certainly a lot of aspects of time are a construct, but I also think that time is a little bit like we're the fish that don't know that water exists. The fish, like, like we're just swimming in it.
Yes. And that's a great analogy because as I'm listening to you, I had a thought in my head, like, this is all new information. I didn't realize how tied to the zodiac we really are and how much information about our bodies you can glean from the zodiac. I knew that it was, it kind of lays out your nodes, your life plan. I knew that it has a lot to do with what happens to you in this life. I know that a lot of it is predestined based on the stars, but I didn't know that your actual health, things like pain, things like, trauma in the body, you could also correlate to your zodiac.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, I had no idea.
Yeah. Your traumatic experiences are all there, like where that's just like Saturn being the taskmaster for, in your life. And and there's a whole branch of astrology that's medical astrology that really looks at all of that. But what I do is still different than medical astrology at large, because it's really just like getting you geometrically lined up so those energies don't compete in your body so hard and you can move through with more resilience, and like we all know, I've had the experience of somebody living rent-free in our heads.
Yep.
And but like people, like you're, like I will tell you that like my mother was breathing rent-free in my body for a long time until I regulated myself out of that. And, and that shows up in our astrology charts in some really interesting ways. And and being, really coming in, like astrology for me has been an incredible portal to compassion for difficult people in my life, because I'm like, oh, all of their planets are in fixed signs. They're not going to be cognitively flexible. Like they just really aren't wired for it so much, or they never do, or like in my mother, her Uranus is 90 degrees from my Venus, and she just considers it her job to pull the rug out from everything I just love and value, or to, disrupt what I love and value. And like, so I don't get offended anymore when she says things or does things that might, like in the way that I used to, because she's just doing her job. Like this is
Yep.
just the way our energies interact. And I don't and so it doesn't trigger me anymore.
I can align with you on that when I started understanding how our past lives work and how much we are pre-programmed to react to certain stimulus before we even get here, folks. Like you are really programmed to respond according to, you know, what was set out for you before
100%.
you got here. And so I do find myself having a lot more compassion for people, knowing that number one, most people are walking around not living very consciously. They're not thinking about their emotions. They're not thinking about how their emotions affect them negatively or positively. And they're certainly not cognizant or aware that a lot of the reasons why they have these feelings is because they are set up to do so. You are programmed. You come down here with these feelings, these tendencies, these predispositions that are from the zodiac in your prior lives. And it's just fascinating to me how much I've learned about this.
Yeah, it's really true. Well, and all of those things, like, whether you believe it's past lives or ancestral or childhood trauma or whatever it is, it's all living in the present in your body.
Yep.
And yeah, and then just getting it out of competition with your nervous system and more into collaboration with it is a huge, it's a huge gift to be able to, because then it doesn't live, kind of like doesn't live rent free in your head.
Yeah. And also when maybe I'm talking in a term, but when you're not, when your nervous system is dysregulated or out of balance, it can cause dis-ease. It can cause energy blockage. It can cause things like cancer, things like emotional problems, like all of that
Absolutely.
stuff can manifest in you. I have a question. When I was reading about you, the a theologist. I have never heard that term. I have a degree in neurobiology. And I was like, neurotheologist, I've heard of that, but I'm not going to look it up. I'm just going to ask her on the show. Can you, is that new? Like, am I
It's
just
pretty new. Yeah. And Andrew Newberg he is at Thomas Jefferson University in Pennsylvania now. He's a physician and he researches the brain activity and spiritual experiences and around religious beliefs and practices and all of that. And so that is a term that he really coined. But when I learned about it, I was like, oh, I think that's what I've been doing my entire like science of how these spiritual traditions and experiences live in the body. Now my slant on it is a little different than what Dr. Newberg does. And he's got amazing books. I encourage everybody go look up Andrew Newberg and read all of his books because they're amazing. But it's that but we are wired for spirituality, in the way that it's genetic, that it's, and really in spirituality, I think there's a lot of overlap between that and how we're also wired for stories. Like we're not wired for facts. We are wired for stories. And spiritual traditions come with lots of stories. With stories, we remember something like 70% more, 80% longer. And you would not, what's really special about stories or what makes a good story, a huge part of it is the contrast in a story. Like you would not go to a movie, read a book, or watch a TV show and rave about it to your friends if it didn't have enough contrast in it, because it would be boring. And contrast is also the language of the nervous system. Neurons fire, they don't. There is no in between. They work on an all or nothing rule. And your nervous system will not let you live a dull story.
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? Who do you work remotely? Do you only work in person? Who can benefit from this the most? Is it pain management? Is it emotional? Is it what are your client base? Who comes to you for assistance?
I get as a physical therapist, pain is often the motivator that gets people in. But it's not, but people come with a lot of other diagnoses. like, so there's often a mental health, like they've got a psychiatrist that's medicating them for something. And there's, sometimes other complex medical, like most people don't come to me until they've been around the block a few times because I don't take insurance. And there's, like it's when, and so, I mean, I've got my long-term clients, but that's but most people really, I'm kind of their last resort or the next, like when nothing else has worked.
Do you feel like the clients that come to you, their last resort, and they are more open to the spiritual part of it?
They would
like
walk on their heads if I told them to, because they are so over whatever has been going on.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I don't mind it if they push back. Like they can push back with all this. Like, I mean, I am so happy to go hardcore science with people if you're not going to buy, like, I'm not going to make you buy into the spirituality piece. But because we are wired for stories, it is the super highway in your brain versus the mule path. And, and my interest is like getting them better faster. I really get, a lot of people now, or one of the common, in hindsight, one of the, I talk about this, it's kind of like the sunglasses that were on my head that I was searching for years. But it is working with a lot of people that have religious trauma.
Yes.
And so
that's a thing. That is surely a thing out there. My sister, I don't have any trauma from it just because I'm built differently. Maybe it's because of my zodiac, but I do have an older sister we grew up in the same house, obviously, came up under hellfire, brimstone. And she talks about being still to this day and traumatized by some of the guilt, shame that she experienced growing up, because that was what we were taught. I don't have that, but I was an atheist for I went atheist. I just stepped back into spirituality. I don't think I'll ever go to church, and be in that world. But I certainly now believe fully in a higher power. I believe I believe God lies within. I believe we are all sparks of God,
absolutely,
the divine. That's what I believe.
I completely concur. And I will tell you that the atheists in my life that I love very dearly, I would say music is their religion. I live in New Orleans and there's lots of music, and like the music is a spiritual practice for them. And it is that is absolutely as valid as any other spiritual practice.
Yep. Do you feel like this is the future of medicine, like the blending the esoteric and the materialistic biological beings portion of us?
I do. Absolutely. There's a whole, Columbia University now has a whole specialization in narrative medicine.
Oh, narrative medicine. I never even heard of that.
Kind of like, patients' story, like assembling their stories and treating their stories. But like, I do think that this storytelling piece and helping people give their illness some context and some perspective, to be able to get the altitude above it, to see it differently, is incredibly healing. And medicine is very slowly catching on to this. The challenge is always because you can't put it in a pill.
Right. You can't make a whole lot of money off this. That's the problem.
It's not as profitable. But this is where I think, like, I am really into, I do see if I have a small one-on-one contingent, but this is where I'm really interested going forward now. I'm really pushing doing groups and giving people and looking into like, how do we scale nervous system regulation so that we can so that the healing really just ripples out, because with groups, the most fun thing is to treat one person and then have everybody else retest themselves and see that they've all shifted, because we're all connected.
Yes,
and
we are.
Well, when I think about like for me, I've been playing with feng shui for many years, and feng shui is 100% a nervous system regulation strategy. And you can, if I win, or say, this is my manifestation. When I win the lottery, I am going to fund artists to feng shui cities. Like, this is what, like I could totally talk at length about how that needs to happen here in New Orleans.
Yes.
And but to really or I think like in a classroom full of high risk children, I used to do physical therapy in the lowest performing school systems in New Orleans. And for those kids have lots of trauma. They've witnessed murders. There's all sorts of, and there's just gaps in the services for them. And, everybody's doing the best that they can. But how would you decorate it? I have lots of thoughts about how you would decorate a classroom to heal, to capture, to really work on healing the trauma at that age so it doesn't follow them into adulthood.
Yep. I mean, I don't have any experience with feng shui, but I will say this. I always, when I'm coming into people's homes or even when I'm even my own home, I like to have things around me that feel good, that, my house is always tidy. I feel like your exterior is a reflection of what's happening on in your interior. And having a beautiful surrounding place, however you find that peace, is, I think, very important to mental well-being.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you a more even tangible or like a example. So like we all know that shame has a posture. So like when we experience shame, people or somebody feels ashamed, like they'll hang their head around their shoulders. And so when and we all spend all day in a shame posture looking at our phones, and our ancient brain doesn't know that we're not experiencing shame when we're hanging our head looking at our phones, because that's how we've been wired for billions of years. So we're just reinforcing our shame circuits by looking down, like not looking up at the sky to see what's there.
I'm going to literally note that to myself the next time I'm looking at my phone. I'm going to be like, wait a second, what am I doing? Don't be in shame posture.
So if you think about young children that maybe have experienced lots of shame just from, from like at home through being yelled at or whatever kind of, like the ancestral trauma in their lineage that, is very, very real, and how they inherit it and all this. It's like, well, in a classroom setting, just getting these kids to look up, maybe decorating everything above eye level, or that you would have things strategically placed around the room to draw their eyes upwards, would help rewire shame. I mean, and they could do, there are exercises you could do to like, okay, class, it's time to start, like we're going to start this section, like everybody, like take your pencil out and follow it up and down and left and right. And like, okay, now we're all ready to write, to do whatever the task is, that you can kind of create these classroom rituals that are really very evidence-based, but that would support the nervous system, and colors affect the brain differently too. So like you could choose your paint colors for a classroom based on that too. And, that we could really do this so much
smarter
than we're doing it. And I think that bringing, good design, feng shui is just a lot of good design principles at some level.
And everything's energy, and you want it flowing. You want your energy flowing naturally. You don't want to have energy blockages. We are all energetic beings. We are.
Totally. Yes. Well, and feng shui is very honestly astrology for your house, and it helps the energy flow smoothly through your house instead of like a storm, instead of going through your house like a storm. Yeah. My parents for the feng shui or lunar new year of 2023, starting in 2023, they are the poster children of what happens when you have the calamity star at your front door and don't remedy the situation. Like they're like, well, we don't believe in feng shui. We're not going to do anything about it, and my parents are like, they're elderly, and it was just like calamity after calamity that they wouldn't do anything about.
Yeah. It's interesting how we as humans, and I include myself in this, like we are not capable of real change, I think, unless it affects us personally. It is almost impossible. And it's a rare event when somebody can actually change something about themselves unless they have it happen to themselves, or it happens to somebody so close to them that it impacts them. We're just not capable of real change unless trauma ensues. Like it's terrible, but like,
it's true. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we're wired for what's familiar, not what's right for us.
Yeah.
Like that's the hard, like that's it. I mean, that's why abused women go back to their abusers. Like it is like the like the devil you know is less scary than the devil that you don't.
Yep. 100%. So I know you have your own podcast called Fearless Presence, and I want to know a little bit more about it, what topics you cover, what you do, but what does Fearless Presence mean to you? What does that mean to you?
To me, a fearless presence is uniting ancient and modern science so you can have the time of your life. It's really being able to be fully expressed, to show up. It's all of those things, but that you get to be that you get to bring together your knowledge, like all of your expertise and all of your intuition, and that they don't have to exist exclusive of each other. And one of the things that people, like my patients over the years, like I was the keeper of everybody's intuitive skills secrets that they never told anybody else, but they just like, it was like confession to come into my office and tell, and be able to say that, oh, I see auras, or I have prophetic dreams, or all these things that people have that they just don't feel safe saying out in the general public in the rest of their lives. And we need safe spaces to be able to express those parts of ourselves too, because they are equally valid as all of the scientific pieces of us. And the science is there to really show how this works in our brains now.
Yeah. And it's real. We are so, I say this on the show all the time. We are so much more powerful than we think we are. There's so much more going on that our senses are not even picking up, that is happening around us.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't give ourselves enough credit for being magical, for being metaphysical, for having the capacity to create our own reality. Our thoughts turn into things. If you're vibrating low, you're going to have low vibrational living. If you're vibrating in a higher density, a higher dimension, you're probably going to have much more beautiful things happen to you. They're going to call you lucky. They're going to call you, everything always goes right for that person. That's your energy in real time.
Absolutely. Yeah. We are, one of my favorite quotes from a neuroscientist is that we're all hallucinating. Reality is just the hallucination we've agreed upon.
Yes.
And if you want something different, you literally just have to hallucinate something different to make it your reality. And one of my big, how do I want to say this? Like one of the big like bones that I pick with the trauma-informed community and a lot of the nervous system regulation that's out there is that there is a lot of messaging that, and I've seen the most poignant comment that I've seen on like one very high profile person's Instagram feed was, from someone that said, so what you're telling me is that every crumb of my being is a trauma response. And no, like not every trauma of your being is a trauma response. You are an incredibly resilient, pleasure seeking love bomb that, that is just like, and to me, that's the magic of looking at, of being time informed with rehabilitation rather than trauma informed. Because, and I don't want to like, I get how important trauma rehabilitation is. I really do. But you will never sell trauma rehabilitation to the whole world because not everybody wants to deal with it, but they might like to have a different relationship with their time. They might like more playtime, more joy time, more family time, more downtime, more together time, more health time, you can run through all the houses of the zodiac and pick the different kinds of time that people might really want, and so you can then, depending on what time, when I ask people how would you like to spend your life? What kind of time do you want? If they want better communication time or more money time or more family time or whatever, we can tie that to specific parts of their body and use nervous system regulation exercises very strategically to help them get the kind of time that they're really looking for.
That's amazing. Do you have any quick exercises that people could do from home to help regulate that? Like, can you, what can people do out there to help get their systems regulated?
Yep, absolutely. My favorite exercise that I developed is called helical breathing. And because our like our heart tissue is spiraled, like is helical, our DNA is helical. There's, we live in the way our universe spins is helical. And in all humans, the right side of the diaphragm has more muscle mass than the left. If you're going to do this exercise, please do not be doing anything else. Like stop driving, do not multitask while you're doing this exercise. Give it your full attention. But you're going to cross your left ankle in front of your right and like sit up on the edge of the chair, like give yourself some good posture so that.
Can I do this right now?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Left to the right. Okay.
And then you're going to take your right hand and reach across your body. If you can, put it on the outside of your left thigh. Okay. And then put your left hand behind your head. And if you have any limitations, you just do as much or as little. You don't have to do the whole thing. Our brains don't see imagining something and doing it as any different. So just imagine you're all wrapped up in a spiral if you have any physical limitations that don't allow you to do this. And so now you want to inhale into the back of your heart. So you're going to expand your rib cage behind you. Like try to breathe, inhale into your shoulder blades and then hold for a few seconds. So like inhale for 3, hold for 6, and then exhale for 9. So longest exhale, like you're blowing out through a straw. And you can do that 2 or 3 or 5 times. It doesn't take a lot. And actually, I should have prefaced this. Ideally, you would maybe check your range of motion, see how tight your neck is or your shoulder or your calf.
I just cracked my neck there.
Like have a little before and after test. But to inhale into the back of your heart, hold, and then exhale. And this is a beautiful way to decompress your vagus nerve. It's a beautiful way to dome up your diaphragm because when we get things get dysfunctional in our bodies, our diaphragms get flat, and we have muscles that attach to our diaphragm that literally make a star, like an asterisk in the center of our bodies. And so we really have to, so having your diaphragm in the right place makes a million other things better in the body. And that's one really easy exercise for that. The other one I really like is to grab the tabs at the front of your ears, like the ones that you would, if you didn't want to hear us today, that you would push down over your ear holes. Yeah, but to grab them between your thumb and forefinger and pull the right one very gently to the right and the left one very gently to the left. You can try and imagine that you've got laser beams or so connecting them, to create a little energy between them, but just very gently. You're not going to pull with more than 5 grams, which is the weight of a nickel, or maybe a pound at the most. Okay. This isn't a hard pull kind of exercise. Just almost imagine pulling and you'll get more. But it's kind of like it'll feel kind of like you're unwrapping a piece of taffy or bubble gum in there, but to hold it for a minute or so. And that's a really beautiful way to decompress the vagus nerve at the base of your skull.
What I do a lot of infrared saunas, and then directly after the infrared sauna, I will hop into a cold shower because they say that stimulates the vagus nerve. Is that
absolutely
correct?
Oh, it totally does. It absolutely does.
Okay.
Yeah. And the no, there's good research on that. The not everybody is willing to do that. And for people in a lot of chronic pain, like that kind of cold is completely intolerable to them. It's a huge threat to their nervous system.
It's hard for me to get into cold water. I have to really I'm doing this for my health and I step in, but it's almost painful to go from really hot to cold for me.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And so I don't think that my people come from Finland, just south of the Arctic Circle. I can do, I have the constitution to do that, but I recognize that not everybody does but that's literally wired into my DNA. So, I live in New Orleans, people are very fair weather here, and it is good, but it's not the only way. The beautiful thing about healing is that there really are 47,000 different ways to do it. And, if you don't, I don't think everybody has to cold plunge to get better.
I would never be one of those polar bear plungy person. That would probably not go well for me. I'm not that girl. Yeah. I'm definitely not.
Yeah.
Well, look, Melanie, we are coming up on an hour, but I got to tell you, I've I've done my fair share of shows, and I have learned so much in this show. I know my audience has, and you are a gift, a delight. I hope
Well,
you reach as many people out there as possible. And if people wanted to reach out to you and get advice, get some anything from you, I don't know if you do any remote stuff. Do you do anything
I do.
remotely?
Oh yeah, I do lots of stuff remotely. I mean,
Okay.
probably the easiest thing. Well, I'll say it's all on at my website, melanieweller.com.
Okay.
But for my paid Substack community, which is as little as $5 a month, I do live healing demonstrations twice a month.
Oh, great.
And and there's lots of free resources. You can absolutely reach out to me if you are interested in some one-on-one work. And I also do the first Sunday of every month, I do a Rewiring Religion event that's free where where I teach a lot of this. So I've got lots of free resources to support people. And yeah, so I mean, I have taught high ticket stuff a lot, and I'm really trying to make this. I feel right now it's very important to make this information accessible to a large amount of people and not have the so there's lots of free resources, and if you want to work with me, you absolutely can, but it's not but there are lots of ways. I'm giving away a lot of this information because my interest is really in scaling it right now, and and how to create collective transformation, because I think we're dying trying to do it one-on-one.
Yeah. And I also think that we need to start normalizing this. When you were saying that a lot of your clients are coming to you in this shame posture that they have seen orbs, or that they have that they get downloads or whatever, and they're not comfortable to say that out loud to anyone except you, like that says a lot to me. Like, I mean, I've gone through my own transformation, and my beliefs have changed dramatically over the last 5 years of my life, but I have never felt shame or any kind of embarrassment for my new spiritual beliefs. And my heart goes out to people that can't step into their own gifts. I wish I had gifts to step into, man. You know what I'm saying?
Well, right. No, we all have them, right. Well, and that's one of the differences of living. I mean, I went to school in Los Angeles and lived in San Diego. And that's part of living out there versus living, I do a lot of work, stuff up in Tennessee. Like when you're in the Bible Belt, or here, New Orleans is pretty progressive itself, but the rest of Louisiana is not. And there's a lot of religious trauma and religious overlay, that people are not willing to let these things out. And even that lives in our collective DNA in terms of how, herbalists and healers and witches and all sorts of women over time were murdered by the church.
Yeah, burnt at the stake because you're right. In a way, though, it's strange to me because there is a lot of reaction of, it all stems from fear, but it shows up as rage or as anger or as, it really does. Like, we're not really that much more evolved than we were when we were burning the witches at the stake. I think
absolutely not. Yeah.
Absolutely
not. No. And it's, and I think I just encourage people to be very compassionate to themselves. And it's even I watched, the Netflix has a relatively new movie on Mary Magdalene, or Mother Mary, Mary and Jesus, story of Mary and Jesus. And oh my gosh, that hit me in a very unexpected place watching it. My anger for just all how women have been treated for so long really came up to the surface in a big way with that, which I didn't really expect. And we're, and you are you're you're a human being, not a human doing. And the more you can just be, never minimize how magical that is. That just being the medicine, that just being in the world and being yourself is. That it's not always about doing anything superhuman, that, but really just be yourself to the best of your ability. And that's, and experience the more awe and reverence you can have for life and for the magical being that you are.
Yes.
That's pretty incredibly healing, I find, for most people, because it's because we're so conditioned to think that we're not enough.
Absolutely. And that a lot of that comes from the church, though. They're taught to be unworthy. They're taught. And the other thing that comes from the church is this patriarchy. This women aren't. I came up in a church where women weren't able to be elders. They weren't able to lead service. They weren't able to do anything. And I see this ticking up in our environment. Again, rearing its ugly head.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, try it, bro. Bring it. Bring it.
Well, let me tell you,
try it, bro.
As a woman in her 50s, bring it.
Bring it. Let's go.
And I will. Yeah. And you want to see who I'm going to protect.
Yeah. Let's go.
I'm going to, take you. I feel very much like this, there's a new way to warrior ourselves through this, and that our intuitive skills are a huge part of that. And you and I could talk the brain science all day long of what's happening in an oppressor's brain versus what's happening in a victim's brain.
Yeah.
Versus in terms of how we get conditioned and how that shows up in the collective. And we're really living Neptune and Pisces right now. We're just in this is all part of that. But it's
I also think we are going to see a resurgence of the rise of the feminine divine. I think that is going to come back up in our collective. And I think especially women in their 50s who have had all of this education, they're independent, they are at powerful positions, and they are not messing about. And if they think they're going to be able to put the cork back in that bottle, good luck. Good luck.
No, I think that it's I'm here for it. And
Me too.
it's I think we need my Substack is called Revolution of Resilience, and that's really what we need. And we need to know our really come and connect with our own really get to know our inner authority. And that's the greatest act of revolution that you can have, is knowing your inner authority. And those are great stories. Like Joan of Arc is a great example of knowing, being in her inner authority. And I think middle-aged women are going to save the world for sure over the next years. And it is that my kids are grown. So I have, some time, space, and perspective, real experience, being in the weeds of it all too, to bring that to the table. And you just have to, it's very easy to get into all the doom and gloom, but women, to borrow from Valerie Rain, who's she's a psychologist who wrote a book called Patriarchy, Stress Disorder. She says that women are very good at playing, or men are conditioned to play the game of how good can it get, while women are conditioned to play the game of how much can we bear. And when women start to play the game of how good can it get, things will change. And
I mean, I've been playing that game. I am that game, and I will put myself toe to toe with any man out there. Bring it.
And when it comes to spiritual text, just so much of it it's conveniently interpreted to be in a way that it can be weaponized. And it's completely interpreted without historical context, without, it just gets interpreted in a vacuum and doesn't mean at all what it.
Well, I feel like the entire thing has been twisted to prop up this power, money, men, hierarchy. All of that is our system is based on that whole thing, which needs to evolve. And you are right. Just to round back with you, it is easier to come out and talk about spirituality, orbs, ghosts, whatever, when you live in LA, when it's not such everybody here really doesn't care what I think.
Right. But in a family situation here, you're to be evicted from, the threat of being ostracized by your community, you're hurt, whether that's your church or your family or whatever. it's very real for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but find a friend. Like if you, like I promise you play this game, people like it is like, I love asking what people's intuitive gifts are because it really, or like spooky things that have happened to them and
Yeah.
whatnot, because like we do need to talk more about it and put it out
We
in the
do. We
open.
need to normalize it. It's the future. It's who we are. Embrace who we are. Be your authentic self and everything will align for you if you
Yeah.
are your truest, most authentic version of who you are. You can say a lot of things about me. I'm pretty freaking authentic is all. Like I pride myself like I have one face. It's this one. I don't have like a professional face and a podcast face and
Yeah.
this is my face. If I met you in person, it's exactly how I talk.
Yeah.
So,
No, I
I
feel like
mean,
I've gotten there now, but I think for a long time it was, like I would say that, like some of the worst stage fright I've ever had is in front of my mother. Like I'm fine in front of like 500 people. Like
yeah,
but like, like in the family room was very often the hardest space for
yeah.
me, and so we all have um,
We all have our hangups,
we
we
all
all
have
have
our
our things.
hangups and where,
Yeah,
where we're going to protect
yep,
ourselves.
yep,
But just like, it's okay. Like all you have to do is the next best step.
yep, yep. Well, Melanie, I'm glad you're out there. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. I learned so much on this podcast. I didn't realize how important your nervous system is. How I didn't understand that it was so aligned with the zodiac. There's so many things that clicked for me on this show. I hope it clicked for you guys out there. I would have you back anytime you
Oh, I
want
will come
to
back
come,
anytime. This was so fun. This was
you
so fun. And
know.
there's so much more. Like as you're saying that, I'm like, oh, I didn't say this and I didn't say that.
It really
Yeah,
is like we let's do mid-year or towards the end of the year, bring you back. I'll
yeah.
promote whatever you got going on and we will have some more in-depth conversations. And thanks again.
Awesome. Thank
On
you.
on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week on the Fate podcast. I'd like to thank Melanie for coming aboard. Journey well, everyone. See you next week. Bye-bye. Alrighty, guys, that is a wrap on this episode of Fate, from Atheism to Enlightenment. I want to thank Melanie Weller for coming on, the Body Whisperer. I learned so much in this episode. I had no idea about the zodiac and our nervous systems and how aligned and attached they are. I found it to be fascinating. I'd love to have her back on the show so we can even dive deeper into it. It was so informative. If you are looking for Melanie Weller's help in any way, I'll go ahead and leave her information, her Substack, in the show notes. I'm going to follow her on the socials. I'm definitely going to have her back on the show. And who knows, if I'm ever out in New Orleans, I think I'm going to look her up and get a session. I think she can illuminate me to maybe what's going on with me in the health arena. Like, I didn't want to get into it too much on the show because it's not what we were here for. But I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I would love to have a session with her to see what she can tell me about my own health, about what's going on with my nervous system, the stuff I had affected my brain. But I certainly think that maybe she would be able to give me some information, so maybe she could improve my health, give me tips. Maybe regulating my nervous system and my vagus nerve is something that would um, level me up in a lot of ways. So always like to try new things, especially when it comes to marrying the spiritual and science. I loved how she brings those two pieces together. I haven't seen it done like this before. And it was really intriguing for me, exciting for me, and is yet again another example of how important, like, knowing who you are, what we are, what energy is, how connected we are to our universe, right? I mean, it's fascinating to me. I hope you're enjoying what I'm doing here. If so, do me a little favor. Tell a friend. Share, like, subscribe, turn somebody onto the show. I would love to keep doing this for as long as possible. I'm learning so much. I hope you are too. Stay with me. I'm going to keep plugging away and walking in this direction until I'm not. So, if you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at F.A.T.E. podcast. Follow the show. Give me a little love. I don't post a ton. I keep saying I'm going to get out on social media more. I do intend to do so. I'm just extremely busy. Between this podcast and I got a couple other balls up in the air that I'm trying to keep spinning. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to work on it. I am working on it. Follow me, support the show. And with that, gang, we will see you next week on Faith, from atheism to enlightenment. See you later. Bye.